The American Revolution, an incredible story of rebellion, bravery, and the birth of a new nation. But how did 13 colonies go up against the might of the British Empire? Let's explore how it all happened. It all began in the mid-1700s. Britain was expanding its empire, and the American colonies were thriving. However, after the costly 7 Years' War, Britain needed revenue. They decided to tax the colonies, starting with the Sugar Act in 1764 and the notorious Stamp Act of 1765. The Stamp Act taxed printed materials. This didn't sit well with the colonists, who were outraged by the idea of taxation without representation, since they had no voice in British Parliament. Protests erupted. Groups like the Sons of Liberty, led by figures such as Samuel Adams, organized boycotts and harassed British officials. Eventually, Britain repealed the Stamp Act, but that didn't mean the conflict was over. In 1767, the British passed the Townshend Acts, imposing more taxes on goods. These goods included paper, glass, and tea. Once again, the colonists protested. Tensions escalated, especially in Boston, where British troops had been sent to keep order. Things took a deadly turn on March 5, 1770, when British soldiers shot into a crowd during a confrontation, killing 5 colonists. The event, called the Boston Massacre, inflamed anti-British sentiment, and then came the tea. In 1773, Britain passed the Tea Act, leading to one of the most famous acts of rebellion in American history, the Boston Tea Party. A group of colonists, disguised as Mohawk Indians, boarded British ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor, making a bold statement. Britain's response was swift. They passed the Coercive Acts, known by the colonists as the Intolerable Acts, punishing Massachusetts. This punishment included closing Boston Harbor and placing the colony under military rule. The colonies knew they had to unite. In 1774, representatives from 12 colonies, Georgia stayed behind, met in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. They decided to support Massachusetts, boycott British goods, and prepare for war if necessary. In April 1775, war broke out when British troops marched to Lexington and Concord to seize colonial arms. Thanks to warning riders like Paul Revere, the colonial militia was ready. The first shots of the American Revolution were fired, marking the beginning of a long and bloody conflict. In 1776, the Continental Congress met again, and this time they decided to go all the way. Thomas Jefferson was tasked with drafting the Declaration of Independence, a document that listed the grievances against Britain. It also boldly declared that the colonies were free and independent states. On July 4, 1776, the Declaration was adopted, and the United States was born. The war raged on, with victories and defeats on both sides. George Washington, leading the Continental Army, faced immense challenges. His troops were often outnumbered, undersupplied, and inexperienced, but they persevered. One key moment came in December 1776 when Washington famously crossed the Delaware River and surprised the British at Trenton, giving the Americans a much-needed victory. Despite moments of triumph, the war was brutal. During the winter of 1777-1778, Washington's army suffered at Valley Forge. Thousands of soldiers endured freezing temperatures, hunger, and disease, but they emerged stronger, thanks in part to new training by Prussian military officer Baron von Steuben. The tide of the war began to turn in 1781. With help from the French, the American and French forces trapped the British army. This army was led by General Cornwallis at Yorktown, Virginia. After weeks of siege, Cornwallis surrendered, effectively ending the war. 2 years later, in 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, officially recognizing the United States as an independent nation. Against all odds, the American Revolution had succeeded.